Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 7 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 18-3 with this deck, so it's been performing really well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTGAzone link down in the description. If you click on that, I'll have the full deck list there that you can import into arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTGAzone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my red-white ThopterBlade deck in Historic, and this has been a real passion project since the set came out. I've been trying a ton of different builds out with this shell, and I've finally come up with one that I'm happy with. And this deck is quite tricky to play because there's so many different decision points about what to do with your mana, but it's been so much fun to play as well. But anyway, as the name suggests, this deck is kind of built around two main engine cards. First of all, we've got Retrofitter Foundry, which is the Thopter part of the deck, and also Sword of Forge and Frontier, which is the Blade side of the deck, obviously. So, we're going to start off with this because it's the new card from the latest set that kind of inspired the deck in general. So, it's a 3-mana equipment. Equipped creature has +2/+2 and has protection from red and green. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn, and you may play an additional land this turn. So, equipment in Historic has typically been unplayable just because there isn't really good quality ones. You know, the only two that ever really see play is Nettle Cyst, which is basically a creature with an equipment attached to it, and Shadow Spear, which we're running, which is just incredibly efficient for what you get for it. So typically all the other equipments aren't really worth it because it's such an investment, right? You've got to pay for the equipment, then pay to equip it. So if the opponent kills the creature you're trying to equip, that's a real mana disadvantage for you. But the main reason why equipment hasn't really been good is just because we don't really have good quality stuff. And Sword of Forge and Frontier is actually really sick because if you manage to connect with this, it does start snowballing the game a lot. You know, you produce card advantage, and you can also ramp not only from the lands that you exile off it, but you can also ramp with lands from your hand as well. So if you do manage to connect with this early, you can just start snowballing the game as well. Now, like I said, you know, typically equipment isn't playable because you have to invest so much mana into equipping it, but we can kind of bypass that a little bit by running Fervent Champion. So the really sick thing about Fervent Champion, I mean, to be honest, everything on this card is really nice for what we're trying to use it for. First Strike and Haste are really good as an aggressive card, but the main thing we're really interested in here with the sword is that we can equip the sword to it for free because it says equip abilities you activate that target Fervent Champion cost 3 less to activate. So if we have Fervent Champion in play on turn 1 or 2 and we play the sword on turn 3, we can immediately equip it and attack, and that's really difficult for most decks to deal with, you know, unless the opponent's also playing a Retrofitter Foundry deck where they have a 4/4 in play. Most decks aren't able to effectively block a 3/3 First Strike Haste, and if you do start connecting with this, like I said, you do start snowballing the game pretty quickly. Then the protection from red and green is also really huge on this because it kind of mitigates the weakness of the other main engine in the deck. So Retrofitter Foundry is a very effective engine, but the main weakness of this is it's not very good against decks that can just chump block or just block your creatures anyway. And the main two decks in the format that are very good at doing that right now are decks like Mono Green Devotion and Mono Green Elves. So Mono Green Devotion has stuff like Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns that can very effectively block the 4/4s that you make off Retrofitter Foundry, and Sword of Forge and Frontier completely bypasses that. You know, the main way that we beat the Mono Green Devotion deck is by equipping Fervent Champion or another creature with the sword, and they just can't block you because it has protection from green. You just start connecting every single turn, getting a ton of card advantage, and then just swinging through. They can't block any of your creatures. And then the same thing with a deck like Mono Green Elves. That's a deck that's very good at going wide quickly and just chump blocking all your stuff. And again, giving your creatures protection from green is really huge at bypassing that. Protection from red is also very good. You know, if you're up against a mono red deck, you're just going to completely destroy them with this card. And additionally, a lot of decks like Is It Wizards and Is It Phoenix also rely on red damage based removal to interact with you. So having your creatures have protection from red is really sick at ensuring they don't get killed by burn spells as well. So sword is very effective with the Fervent Champion. And even outside of that, you know, we can just equip it to other creatures later in the game, and it does just tend to snowball the game. But the main thing we're trying to set up here is Fervent Champion on turn 1 or 2, into sword on 3, and then just start swinging in and snowballing the game that way. Then the Retrofitter Foundry part of the deck, you know, the other card, you know, we have Sword of Forge and Frontier that pairs well with Fervent Champion. We also have Retrofitter Foundry that pairs well with Ornithopter, because if we have Foundry and Ornithopter on turn 1, we can just play them both, and then we can immediately sacrifice the Ornithopter to make a 4/4 on turn 1, which is so powerful. Even outside of that, Retrofitter Foundry is such a powerful engine at just, you know, giving yourself a mana sink to keep producing tokens. You can keep making chump blockers and then sacrifice them in response to make the next creature along the chain. So Retrofitter Foundry, very, very powerful starts alongside Ornithopter, but also just generically good mana sink as well. You know, it can produce tokens that we can equip with the sword if we're in a grindy situation. And as you get multiples of Retrofitter Foundry, you can start snowballing the game really fast against the grindier decks like Rakdos Midrange as well, particularly when we start copying it with the Mycosynth Gardens that I'll get to later. So Retrofitter Foundry, really, really effective engine at giving us a mana sink, constantly giving us creatures to put into play off it, and then snowballing the long games as well. So those are the two main engines of the deck. We also have two other cards that help us assemble the synergies going on. First of all, we've got Ingenious Smith, so ETBs and finds us an artifact and then starts growing as well. So it's a card that replaces itself and grows as a threat itself as the game goes on. And the really good thing about Ingenious Smith is, like I said, it helps us assemble our synergies. So say we have a Retrofitter Foundry on turn 1, we can play Ingenious Smith on turn 2 and try and find an Ornithopter, and if we do, we can play the Ornithopter immediately, which puts a counter on the Ingenious Smith straight away. Then during the opponent's turn, we can sacrifice the Ornithopter to the Foundry, which again puts another +1/+1 counter on it as well. And, you know, another really nice synergy we've got going on is Ingenious Smith works really well with the Retrofitter Foundry because we can activate the Foundry on our turn to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and during the opponent's by activating it at instant speed. If we have an Ornithopter already, you know, if we go Ingenious Smith into Ornithopter, we can use the Smith to try and find the Foundry as well. And if we have a Fervent Champion, we can go turn 1 Fervent Champion, turn 2 Ingenious Smith to try and find the sword, and then if we find the sword, we can just play the sword on turn 3, immediately equip it to the Fervent Champion and attack. So Ingenious Smith is really good at helping us find our synergies with the Foundry and the sword, and additionally we can use it to find the Sentinel, the Portable Holders removal, Shadow Spear, which is a really effective card in certain matchups, and Darksteel Citadel as well. So Ingenious Smith, really nice at helping us, you know, smooth our draws, find whatever part of the synergies we're missing. And then additionally, another card that's very good at doing that is Ranger Captain of Eos. So this is another really sick card in the deck because when it enters the battlefield, we can use it to tutor either the Fervent Champion or the Ornithopter. So if we have a sword, we can play the Ranger Captain on turn 3, tutor the Fervent Champion, then on turn 4 we can play our land for the turn, play sword, play Fervent Champion, equip it immediately and attack. And additionally, if we have the Retrofitter Foundry, on turn 3 we can go Ranger Captain, tutoring the Ornithopter, immediately play the Ornithopter, and then sacrifice it to make a 4/4. So on turn 3, if we have the Foundry, we can put a 3/3 into play and a 4/4 essentially for free off the Ranger Captain. So being able to tutor Ornithopter and Retrofitter Foundry is really sick, and we can also use it to tutor Esper Sentinel if we're in a spot where that's good as well. Then additionally, the silence effect on this is really nice. The ability to sacrifice it to make your opponents not be able to cast non-creature spells is really sick. The closest deck, I guess like the deck that's the closest to this shell in general is the red-white Thopters deck that I posted a few months back with Lurrus, and the main reason that deck's fallen off recently is with the printing of Brotherhood's End. I think that deck has a really tough time against cards like Brotherhood's End and Divine Purge, for example, because that deck, since it ran Lurrus, didn't really have good ways to stop those sorts of sweepers. You know, the best option you had was Mana Tithe, which just isn't consistent at all. Whereas Ranger Captain is a really effective way at stopping those sorts of things, because you can sacrifice this during the opponent's upkeep if you're ahead on board, to prevent them from being able to cast their Brotherhood's End, Shatterstorm or Divine Purge. So you have a really good, you know, this synergizes really well with the deck in general, and it also protects from the cards that are best against you as well, particularly effective against the control decks to stop Divine Purge. So Ranger Captain really solves a big issue with these kind of artifact synergy decks that have been around for a while now. Then the other cards in the deck, Esper Sentinel is just, you know, one of the best one-drops in the entire format. It synergizes really nicely here because we can find it off the Ingenious Smith, we can equip it with the sword or the Shadow Spear to boost its power to make the opponent, you know, have a harder time playing around the attacks. So Esper Sentinel really, really sick in this deck, particularly right now when Rakdos Midrange is really popular. We've got 4 copies of Portable Hull, so I think 1 mana interaction is super important right now if you're not going way over the top, like if you're playing a combo deck or something, because, you know, you've got Mono Green Devotion where you need to kill that Llanowar Elves on turn 1, you've got Wizards where it's really important to be able to kill Symmetry Sage or Dreadhorde Arcanist, you've got, you know, Esper Sentinel and Thalia are very important to be able to kill without giving the opponent a card. You know, against Auras you need to be able to kill their early creatures, so 1 mana interaction, super important now, and Portable Hold is just the card of choice because, you know, we can find it off the Ingenious Smith, and, you know, it's just the best 1 mana option that you have in white. You know, you could run Fragment Reality, but that's just not as good against the 2 mana creatures, for example. So Portable Hold, really important in the metagame right now to slow down the other creature decks. And then we've also got 1 copy of Shadow Spear, so this is a really sick card in the deck as well. You know, Trample and Lifelink are really sick keywords, especially if you've got a Fervent Champion, because we can equip it for free as well. So we can go Fervent Champion, attach the sword, attach the Shadow Spear, and then it's a a 4/4 with protection from red, protection from green, first strike, trample, lifelink, and snowballs the game as well. Now, I was previously running 2 copies of Shadow Spear in the deck. I did trim it down to 1 to fit everything else in the deck in, but if I was to run a 61st card, it would probably be a second Shadow Spear, but as things stand, it is legendary, so having 2 does produce some diminishing returns, but I'm very happy with the 1, and like I said, I could see an argument to going up to 2, especially if you value the lifelink a lot. And then the last card in the deck, we've also got Fable of the Mirror Breaker, so obviously this is a super generically powerful card. I did try a ton of different builds without Fable, and they did just feel a little bit too inconsistent for my taste, and Fable just really, really helps smooth out the deck in general, and just ensures that you smooth out your draws, don't get stuck with dead cards in your hands. So creates a 2/2 which gives you board presence. The treasure that it creates is really important because we have so many mana sinks in the deck, you're never going to run out of stuff to do with your mana, because we've got Retrofitter Foundry, which is a really sick mana sink. The swords, we can equip the swords if we don't have a Fervent Champion. We also have Mycosynth Gardens that I'll get to in a little bit later as well, and we can tutor stuff off Ranger Captain and Ingenious Smith, so we're never really going to run out of stuff to do with the mana, so creating treasure tokens is very, very valuable. The treasure token also triggers Ingenious Smith on your turn, which is really nice. Then chapter 2, the looting ability. This is honestly one of the main reasons that I'm running the card, because it just helps smooth out your draws. One of the main reasons that I'm only running 3 Ornithopter is because this is a pretty awkward card when you don't have Retrofitter Foundry. Unlike the red-white Thopters deck with Lurus, we're not running stuff like Machiko's Ring of Truth, so if we draw Ornithopter and we don't have a Retrofitter Foundry, it isn't a great card, so being able to discard it to the chapter 2 of Fable is really good, just helps smooth our draws out. Like I said, we're very much a synergy deck. We want to find Sword plus Fervent Champion, we want to find Retrofitter Foundry plus Ornithopter, or Retrofitter Foundry plus Ranger Captain to find the Ornithopter, and so chapter 2, just smoothing our draws out and helping that we dig towards what we need, is very, very valuable. And then chapter 3, Reflection of Kiki Jiki, has a ton of great synergy in this deck as well. Being able to copy Ingenious Smith is really sick. Being able to copy Ranger Captain is very sick as well, because we can copy the Ranger Captain during our end step to search for something, and then we can sacrifice it during the opponent's upkeep to get a silence effect. So if you copy Reflection plus Ranger Captain, you can effectively shut off the opponent from playing sweepers for the rest of the game, which is really sick. Reflection also pairs really nicely with the Retrofitter Foundry, because we can use Reflection to copy the 1/1 the 1/1 Thopter that we get off the Retrofitter Foundry, and then we can sacrifice it to the Foundry to make a 4/4. So Reflection, if it lives, is really sick. So Fable just is the kind of the glue that holds the decks together, and really helps to make sure that you always have your synergies, and it just makes the deck consistent overall. In terms of the mana base, 24 lands has felt like a good amount overall. We are running a decent number of 3-drops, so hitting your 3rd land on curve is pretty important. Running all the good red-white dual lands, and then 1 Igandre, 1 Plains, and then the other new card that I really want to talk about here is Mycosynth Gardens, because this card has been really, really sick in the deck. So taps for colorless, you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color, so it does fix your mana slightly if you're in a really tight spot. For the most part, you don't want to do that because it makes you play off curve, but there will be some situations where you need to use this and it can be helpful. But the main ability we're really interested in here is you can pay X and tap it to turn Mycosynth Gardens into a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X, and there's a ton of really sick stuff you can do with this in the deck. So first of all, if we have Retrofitter Foundry and Ornithopter, we can use this for 0 mana to copy an Ornithopter to produce another 4/4, which is sick. The main use for it is copying Retrofitter Foundry, because Retrofitter Foundry is a card that is better in multiples, right? Because you can then chain together more of the abilities without having to pay 3 to untap it. So if we have a Retrofitter Foundry on play, we can copy it for 1, well, essentially 2 mana, because you have to tap the Mycosynth Gardens, but we can pay 1 and tap it to make a copy of Retrofitter Foundry, which is really, really sick against the grindy decks. Stuff like Rakdos Midrange, stuff like Blue-White Control. It just completely snowballs the game. Even against other aggro decks, I've won games by getting, 3 or 4 copies of Retrofitter Foundry in play by copying them with Mycosynth Gardens, and then you can just completely snowball the game, constantly put creatures into play every single turn, which is really sick. Additionally, we can use it to copy the sword if we have a Fervent Champion, so particularly against the decks like the Mono Green Devotion and Mono Green Elves deck, if we have a Fervent Champion that's essentially unblockable, we can just spend 4 mana, make a copy of the sword, equip it straight away, and then snowball the game even harder, and then we start to get that mana back immediately because we can play extra lands. If we're getting 2 sword triggers, we're getting 4 cards, and we can then play 3 lands that turn essentially, so you get the mana back so quickly off it. So Mycosynth Gardens is such a good mana sink, such a good way to smooth your draws out if you do end up flooding out. Like I said, copying Retrofitter Foundry can just win you games on its own. Copying Sword, if you have the Fervent Champion, can win games on its own. And copying Ornithopter can be really nice as well. So Mycosynth Garden's such a sick card in this deck overall. So that's the main deck. I've been really happy with it. Like I said, I went through a ton of different iterations. I was running some with Nettle Cyst in, which wasn't really that great. And this has definitely felt like the smoothest version out of all of them that I've tried so far. And then onto the sideboard. First of all, we've got one copy of Giant Killer. So this is basically here as a tutor target for Ranger Captain in matchups where the opponent's playing big creatures. So in this deck, the only real removal that we're running is Portable Hole and then Glass Casket. So that does take out most of the creatures in the format, but some decks are running bigger creatures. So for example, RB Midrange runs stuff like Shieldred. The 5-color Niv deck runs Niv Mizzet and Territorial Carvies. So in those matchups where the opponent is running bigger creatures, bringing in the Giant Killer as the tutor target off the Ranger Captain is really important. For a while, I was running Giant Killer in the main deck, but there are just so many decks where you never want to tutor it, and it doesn't really have great synergy with everything else that's going on. Plus, I think space is pretty tight in the main deck anyway, so I'm not really sure there's room for it in the main deck, but I do think you absolutely need this in the sideboard for those matchups where the opponent's running bigger creatures. Then we've got 2 copies of Pithing Needle, so this is here primarily for the Mono Green Devotion deck and Goblin Charbelcher. So originally I was running 2 Damping Spheres specifically for the Devotion matchup, because Devotion can be a tough matchup if you aren't able to assemble Fervent Champion plus Sword, which you're not always going to be able to, right? You're not always going to draw this, so you do need to slow down the opponent. Now, we do have Portable Hole and Glass Casket as a way to slow them down, exiling their Llanowar Elves and their Old Growth Trolls and stuff like that, but I felt like I needed something else just to make sure that we can shut them off. Now, with Pithing Needle, generally, if you have this in the early game, the first target that you want to name is Kiora to stop them untapping their Nykthos. Karn is definitely a big issue for this deck, so we're trying to cut them off Karn if possible. If you do draw the second Pithing Needle, then obviously name Karn off that, but for the most part, we're trying to just go underneath them, assemble Fervent Champion plus Sword before they can get to Karn, and Pithing Needle naming Kiora can stop their fast starts. Now, the reason that I'm running Pithing Needle over Damping Sphere is because I also felt like the Goblin Charbelcher matchup can be quite tricky as well. Now, we do have some very fast starts. Like I said, we can go 4/4 on turn 1 off Foundry plus Ornithopter, and we can get Fervent Champion plus Sword, but we're not always going to have that, and sometimes we don't get to the battlefield that quickly, so having Pithing Needle to name the Goblin Charbelcher is very important there as well. And then I also like to bring in 1 copy of Pithing Needle against the control decks to name stuff like Teferi as well, so it does have applications in a lot of different matchups. Then we've got 4 copies of Glass Casket, so this is just here for any matchup where we want additional removal. Typically against opposing creature decks, Esper Sentinel isn't as good, so I typically just cut the 4 Esper Sentinel, bring in 4 Glass Casket, and this is for matchups like, is it Wizards, Auras, any deck that's just running early creatures that we need to be able to kill, stuff like humans as well. Now, Glass Casket is an interesting choice here, because the main reason that I'm choosing to run this over other options is because we can hit it off Ingenious Smith. In terms of Ingenious Smith hits, we're only running 22 artifacts, which I think is reasonable. That's the main reason, I didn't mention this, but the main reason I'm running Darksteel Citadel is because otherwise, I think we do have too few artifacts off the Ingenious Smith. You're likely to whiff if you're running any fewer. So that's the main reason, because if we board out Esper Sentinel and board into something like Baffling End, for example, then Ingenious Smith is going to whiff slightly more often. The weakness of running Glass Casket is that people are going to be bringing in Brotherhood's End against you, so if you are relying on Portable Hole and Glass Casket, you can kind of get blown out by Brotherhood's End against the decks that do bring it in against you, but a lot of the aggro decks like Auras aren't going to be bringing in Brotherhood's End against you because they're not even in red, so that doesn't come up that often, but I could potentially see an argument to running some other type of removal, like a Baffling End that doesn't get hit by Brotherhood's End, but then you run into the risk of Ingenious Smith whiffing, so on balance, I prefer Glass Casket, but I think it is quite close. And then we've also got 2 copies of Soul Guide Lantern, 1 copy of Unlicensed Hearse's Graveyard Hate. So again, running artifact-based Graveyard Hate because we can tutor it off the Ingenious Smith. 1 Unlicensed Hearse, I think, is the best Graveyard Hate in general, but it does have diminishing returns. You don't really want to be drawing multiples, which is why I'm also running the 2 Soul Guide Lanterns, because we can always just cycle this away if we do draw multiples of it. And the main reason I'm running 3 copies of Graveyard Hate is because since we're reliant on sorcery speed interaction like Portable Hole and Glass Casket, we can tend to struggle against the most commonly played graveyard stuff, like, for example, Mardu Greasefang, or just Greasefang in general. We don't have good ways to stop that if we're relying on sorcery speed removal, so I wanted to have 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate to ensure that we don't get just completely run over by Greasefang. And then additionally, decks like Is It Phoenix, we definitely struggle to deal with the Phoenixes because Phoenix can't be killed by Portable Hole or Glass Casket, so for those 2 matchups specifically, I wanted a decent amount of Graveyard Hate. I also think that Kethis combo has gotten a lot better with the release of Jace, so Graveyard Hate is very, very good in that matchup as well. So I do think 3 pieces of Graveyard Hate is important because the most commonly played graveyard decks in the format we do tend to struggle against because we're reliant on sorcery speed removal. Then we've got 3 copies from Nahiri, so this is another new card from the latest set. And this is a really effective Planeswalker. The first +1 we can use to defend Nahiri. The second one we can discard and draw a card. The important thing to note with this is it works the same way as Seasoned Pyromancer. So if we're completely empty-handed, this +1 just draws us a card, which is really sick, specifically against control where they're trying to strip you of your resources. And then the really powerful ability on this is the 0, where you can exile the creature or equipment from your graveyard with mana value less than Nahiri's loyalty, create a token copy of it, gains haste, and exile it at the beginning of the next end step. So this is really sick in a number of ways because if we have Retrofitter Foundry in play, we can use the 0 to bring back an Ornithopter to sack to make a 4/4. It's very nice to bring back Ingenious Smith because then we get an ETB trigger and get another artifact. If we can get it up to 4 loyalty, we can also bring back Ranger Captain, which is really nice as well. So the main matchup that we want Nahiri for is basically the control deck. You know, the other really nice thing about not running Lurrus compared to the old Thopters deck is that we can also run Planeswalkers, right? And that is, you know, the biggest weakness of this deck into control is Divine Purge. And this build of the deck, you know, one of the main reasons why I like Ingenious Smith, Ranger Captain, and Fable is because it plays around Brotherhood's End more effectively, right? If they pick to destroy all the artifacts, we get to keep the Fable, the Ingenious Smith, and the Ranger Captain, and those are the best targets to copy with Reflection. But the deck is still very soft to Divine Purge, so having Nahiri alongside Ranger Captain's Silence effect gives us really good ways to play around Divine Purge, where the deck was previously pretty weak. And like I said, you know, they struggle to deal with Planeswalkers. We can use this to bring back hasty creatures, which is also very difficult for them to deal with. So against control, I typically board out 4 Portable Hull and board into 3 Nahiri and 1 Pithing Needle. But Nahiri's been very, very good in the control matchup. And then finally, we've got 2 copies of Bifrost, basically for other artifact decks. So Blue-White Affinity, Red-White Thopters, the Mirror Match. And then, you know, I'll also board this in against the Goblin Charbelcher deck. So normally against Charbelcher, I'll board out of the 4 Portable Hull and board into 2 Pithing Needle, 2 Bifrost, just as a way to kill their treasures that they create and also kill the Charbelcher if they hardcast it. But yeah, Bifrost is basically the best card against the other decks because you can tend to struggle against Affinity with certain of their draws. But yeah, Bifrost very, very good in the other artifact decks. So that's the deck in general. I've had a ton of fun playing with it. You know, it is quite a tricky deck to play because there are so many different options about what you get off the Ingenious Smith or the Ranger Captain, whether you use your mana on the Retrofitter Foundry or the Gardens or equipping your sword and stuff like that. But I've had a ton of fun playing this. I really, really like the deck overall and it's been performing pretty well for me. So that's the deck. If you've got any questions about the deck, let me know in the comments. Next time I've got some gameplay with the deck so you guys can see it in action. Just got 5 matches that I was playing with the ladder. Like I said, if you've got any questions or comments about the deck, definitely let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, sweet, here we go. Oh, okay, interesting. So it's never a good idea to assume what deck the opponent's on, but basically every single time I queue into this player, they're almost always on blue-black ninjas. So if I have a decent hand with a Portable Hull, I think I'm much more likely to keep that in the dark against this player just because they're so often on ninjas, but I'm not going to keep a bad hand with Portable Hull just because of that. But yeah, if they are on ninjas, being on the draw here is a bit of an issue because they are a tempo deck in a lot of ways. Okay, sweet. So we have a decent hand with Portable Hull, so definitely going to keep this in the dark. Okay, and they are on ninjas. They've got they got Retrofitter Foundry and the Thopter, so that's a very good start for them. We're definitely going to Portable Hull the Retrofitter Foundry here, but we're still going to have to somehow deal with this 4/4 as well. I mean, on the only positive from this is that I think they're less likely to want to cash in the 4/4 for a ninjutsu, right? The early turns in the opponent's deck, they usually want to go, you know, 1 drop and then start ninjutsuing, but I doubt they're going to want to use the 4/4 for a ninjutsu. Okay, interesting. So opponent just passes here. I think we're just going to go for Ingenious Smith and see what we hit. Hopefully a Retrofitter Foundry. That would be the best hit here. Okay, perfect. We hit the Foundry. So now we have Foundry Thopter for next turn. I think I'm still going to run out the Ornithopter here just to get a counter on Ingenious Smith straight away. Looks like opponent has something. I imagine they've got some sort of creature removal here. And then we'll just pass the turn back. So we'll see what the opponent has. I imagine it's creature removal. You know, they could also have counter spells, but from what I've seen, it's mainly like Spell Pierce and Drown in the Lock as their counter spells. So we don't really have to worry about them countering creatures that much. Okay, see what they do. Changing Outcast is pretty scary because if they find another Retrofitter Foundry, that's another 4/4. If not, they can start using it to ninjutsu as well. So I've got 2 main options here. I think we could either go for Ranger Captain or Retrofitter Foundry and Fervent Champion. I think I like Retrofitter Foundry because we can play around Spell Pierce here and we can turn it into a 4/4. Oh, okay, they have the Drown in the Lock. So maybe that was a reason to go for the Ranger Captain instead. I'm just trying to think whether we want to attack here. I mean, them countering that Retrofit Foundry is pretty rough here. I think my only way of winning this game now is equipping the sword to the Fervent Champion next turn, and then, you know, trying to hit like another portable hole, for example. Okay, they have the Ninja of the D powers. So yeah, I think we're if we can equip the sword and potentially find another portable hole, I think we've got a chance in this game, but wow, missing a land drop again is kind of rough. If they have Spell Pierce here, I think we lose. If they have Fatal Push here, I also think we lose. So this has definitely been a tough match. They got off to a very good start, and I definitely think we got punished for playing the Retrofitter Foundry, but okay, yeah, they've got Fatal Push, we just lose. But if they hadn't had exactly Drowning in the lock there, I think Retrofitter Foundry is the much better play. You know, Ranger Captain doesn't really get us ahead that much, so I think I would still make the same play, but because we were already behind, right? We probably can't afford to play around Drowning in the lock in that spot. So I think here, even though Esper Sentinel is actually good in the matchup, I'm still going to swap it out for the Glass Casket, because this matchup is all about removal. If you can remove their early threats, like their Changing Outcasts and their Ornithopters and Fairy Seers, that slows them down significantly, because their whole game plan revolves around getting a 1-drop down, ninjutsuing it, and then snowballing the game. So if you can cut their 1-drops off and slow their ninjutsus down, the deck actually isn't that fast or that threatening, unless they can get a Retrofitter Foundry in play, in which case we've still got portable holes. So even though Esper Sentinel's good, I'd like to bring it in there. I could swap out Esper Sentinel for... No, sorry, swap in Glass Casket for Fable, but like, for example, a hand like this, right, is much, much better with Fable. When you have so much removal, it helps smooth your draw out. You know, if this Fable was an Esper Sentinel, we don't really have that much top end, if that makes sense. So interesting choice here whether we go for the portable hole or the Glass Casket. I'm not sure if they're running any 3-drops in the deck, to be honest. The risk going for portable hole here over Glass Casket is it's less mana efficient, which is obviously a downside. And if they have 2 Retrofitter Foundries, we could get punished for that as well. But so maybe it's right to go for Glass Casket. But again, I'm not 100% familiar with their list. I don't know if they're playing any 3-drops. And to be honest, we wouldn't really be able to, you know, we didn't have a second White Source until this turn anyway, so we wouldn't really be able to double spell. Thankfully, it looks like they've only got 1 Retrofitter Foundry, but again, if they're holding on to a second, then it's probably a misplay. Maybe I should have used the Glass Casket on the Fairy Seer, but like I said, I'm not sure if they're playing any 3-drops. Okay, so that's a potentially scary card. You know, they can kill the, you know, if we were still running Esper Sentinel, they could kill that with it. So I'm going to run out of Fable here. They could have Spell Pierce, which would be kind of rough. Okay, they don't. Sweet. So that's really nice. So now we've got a 2-2 in play. They're probably going to kill this if they have a removal spell, I'd imagine. And now they can clear the way for the Prowler to ninjutsu. And then they could potentially just cast the Prowler again, which is a bit of a concern. Okay, there's the Infiltrator. So yeah, I don't know if it... Thinking about it, maybe it was correct to use Glass Casket on the Fairy Seer, because I don't think they run any 3-drops. Okay, so I think we want to keep all the cards here. I definitely want to play the second Fable, and I also think I want to get rid of this Moon Circuit Hacker if I can. So we'll play the Fable again here. Use the Glass Casket on the Moon Circuit Hacker. So it didn't end up mastering, but thinking back on it, I think I probably should have used the Glass Casket on the Fairy Seer and saved the second portable hole for a potential Retrofitter Foundry. Now, I hate letting them get in for an attack here, but I don't think it's worth getting rid of the 2-2 here. You know, it's a potential blocker for their other creatures like the 4th Bridge Prowler that we know about. Okay, they just hardcast Ninja of the D powers. Interesting. Okay, Ranger Captain's a pretty sick draw here, so we're definitely not going to loot that away. Going to cast the Ranger Captain here, and then I think I'm just going to get a Fervent Champion here. You know, Ornithopter is obviously not that great without the Retrofitter Foundry. Fervent Champion... Oh, wait, I shouldn't have cast that, actually. No, thinking about it, that was a punt, because I forgot about the 4th Bridge Prowler in their hand. I should have got an Ornithopter, because they can't kill it with the 4th Bridge Prowler. That was my bad. I completely forgot they had that in their hand. So I should have gone for Ornithopter there, just as an additional blocker, because if they kill the Ranger Captain here... I don't think it's worth sacking, because the 2 life could be relevant, and if they've got a second removal spell, they can. Almost all of their removal is going to be instant speed, so they'll be able to use it in response anyway. Yeah, now they use the 4th Bridge Prowler to kill the Fervent Champion. So had I got Ornithopter instead, we would still have a blocker here. So unfortunately, now we've got to let them hit us with the Infiltrator. So yeah, not getting Ornithopter was definitely a big mistake on my part there, because that gave them an extra card basically. Okay, Mycosynth's Garden, so obviously we don't have great target. Well, we don't have any good targets for that right now, because if you can't use Mycosynth Gardens with Portable Hole because you don't get the ETB trigger. I've just got to pray they don't have a removal spell for Reflection here. I'm going to set a stop because if they attack with the Infiltrator, I'm going to make a copy to block with. Now, if they have another Infernal Grasp for the Reflection here, we're probably just going to lose, but if they don't, I actually think we've got a pretty good shot here. Okay, looks like opponent's thinking about something. But yeah, it's very important if you're doing this to set a stop during the end step because it will automatically sack the Reflection if you don't have a stop set. So I'm going to block with the token. I definitely don't want to block with an actual Reflection, and I don't want to allow them to get a card here either. And then I'm just going to copy the other Reflection now so that we can still, you know, do the copying loop. Oh wow, they just scoop it up. Okay, we would have just copied Reflection over and over again to stop them getting in and be able to attack ourselves. But yeah, like I was saying, it's very important to set a stop during the end step there because if you have to make a copy to block, then if you don't have a stop set during the end step, it will automatically sacrifice the untapped copy even if you've not used it yet, which will mean that you're not able to keep making copies of Reflection. So yeah, it's very important to always set a stop during the end step for that reason. But yeah, surprised that we managed to get there that game. You know, we did make a mistake with the Ornithopter, but you know, Fable can win if you just draw multiples on its own, as we saw there. So here, just going to keep the hand. Definitely, you know, we want Portable Hole, Ingenious Smith, and we'll put back the Fervent Champion because we can always just tutor another one if we find a sword off the Ranger Captain. Okay, so opponent scries to the top, which is pretty scary. We're definitely going to lead on the Portable Hole here. You know, we want to stop them being able to ninjutsu as a priority here. And then next turn, we could either go Ingenious Smith or Fervent Champion. Probably the Ingenious Smith unless we draw a sword. Okay, they do have Retrofit Foundry, which is kind of scary, but you know, we've slowed them down quite a lot here. So we go for Ingenious Smith, see what we hit here. Okay, sick. So we hit a Portable Hole, so now we have an answer for the Retrofit Foundry, which is pretty important. Okay, they do push the Ingenious Smith, but that's fine. We've already, you know, got value off it. Okay, a second Retrofit Foundry is kind of scary. So I think we want to lead on Portable Hole. Oh, wait, no, okay. That was a mistake on my part. I probably should have played an untapped land to play around Spell Pierce. That was my bad. But yeah, we definitely want to take out the Retrofit Foundries before they start getting a ton of value off them. Then I'm going to play the Fervent Champion and the Ornithopter as an extra blocker, because if they kill the Fervent Champion, I still want to be able to block the 1-1 and stop them using it for an ninjutsu. But yeah, again, playing slightly too quickly last turn. I definitely should have played an untapped land first to play around Spell Pierce. Okay, so they do have access to a 4/4 off the Retrofit Foundry now. We could go for Ranger Captain, but you know, we'd only really be tutoring another Fervent Champion, so I think we'll go Ingenious Smith first to see what we hit. Okay, Glass Casket's interesting. So I don't think we really want to use the Glass Casket now. I think we're just going to pass back to the opponent here. See if they make a 4/4. Because they could very well have a ninjutsu creature in hand, but if they make a 4/4, they're probably not going to want to trade it in for like a ninjutsu. Okay, they choose not to. They just make a 1/1 Thopter, which is interesting. They attack with both, so they definitely have a ninjutsu creature. That's what I was kind of thinking, you know. Puts them in a rough spot if they do have a ninjutsu creature. We're definitely going to block the Ornithopter here because they obviously have a ninjutsu creature in hand, and this way they lose the 1/1 permanently, whereas if we block the 1/1, they put the Ornithopter back to their hand and can just recast it immediately. Okay, so they do have Ninja of the Deep Powers. They get to draw a card here. And we could make a copy of the Ornithopter, but I don't really think that's worth it at this point. Okay, we draw a land, which isn't great, obviously. And again, you know, well, I don't think it's worth playing the Glass Casket here. We kind of want to wait for them to turn the Ornithopter into a 4/4, ideally, before using that. We'll play the Ranger Captain here, and I think I'll just get an Ornithopter again. You know, we want to just stop them ninjutsuing if at all possible. So if they have a removal spell for the Ornithopter, we have a second one to stop them ninjutsuing the Ornithopter, because they can't really attack with the Ninja of the Deep Powers here. And with two Ornithopters, it's going to be very difficult for them to connect with the Ornithopter that they've got, right? And even if they do manage to kill both Ornithopters, we can still use Mycosynth's Gardens to make a copy at instant speed. Wow, they just scoop it up. I guess they realise they just can't attack through. But we'll take it. Sick. Okay, so we're going second tier. And yeah, this looks good. You know, we've got Fervent Champion and the Sword. We've got Retrofit Foundry, so we could potentially find a Thopter off the Ingenious Smith, and Fable as well. So, okay. Not, you know, turn 1 Elvish Mystic when we don't have a portable hole is very scary, though. So, if I had to guess, I'd probably assume the opponent's on Devotion or Elves. So, we'll see what else they play here. Okay, them attacking with the Mystic is great. That means they're not ramping into a 3-drop. Okay, Jasper Sentinel, so almost definitely going to be on Elves then. So the opponent not having Archdruid on 2 there is huge, because now I think we can potentially just race with the Sword, which is, you know, the main way that we win in this matchup. Okay, so we get an Ornithopter, which is great. That gives us fuel for the Retrofitter Foundry and immediately puts a counter on the Ingenious Smith. So see what else they've got here. Oh no, they're playing Karn. Okay, that's really rough, especially because our whole game plan revolves around getting the Sword on here. And they get Sky Sovereign. Okay, so we have to kill the Karn here, like 100%. So we can't play the Sword. I think that I'm hoping that we can potentially get them to let the Karn die here. I don't think it's worth playing the Sword yet. So I'm going to play the Esper Sentinel first. And then that's going to buff the Ingenious Smith. And then I'm going to attack Karn with both the Ingenious Smith and the Fervent Champion, in the hope that they choose to block the Fervent Champion with the Jasper Sentinel. Okay, perfect. That's really good. I mean, it makes sense from the opponent's side why they would do that, but now we can play the Retrofit Foundry. I guess they thought, you know, blocking like this keeps my Sentinel around and enables me to kill the Ingenious Smith with the Sky Sovereign, but now because we have the Retrofit Foundry, we can sacrifice the Ornithopter to make a 4/4 in response to make the Smith a, you know, turn it into a 4/4 to dodge the Sky Sovereign trigger, so they have to kill the Esper Sentinel here. And it also draws us a card off the Sentinel. Wow, they still go after the Smith. I guess they're hoping that we just don't see this line, maybe? Okay, so the Ingenious Smith survives, which is huge. They don't have enough power in play to crew the Skyfrit Sovereign. Wow, that's a sick draw. So I was hoping to equip the Sword next turn instead, but now we've got the Fervent Champion. We can immediately equip the Sword straight away. And then they can't block the Fervent Champion, so we're definitely going to attack with these 3. I mean, to be honest, I might as well attack with the Esper Sentinel as well. Wow, they just scoop it up. Okay, that was, you know, that was sick. You know, Karn Elves specifically is going to be a tough matchup. So here's sideboarding. Going to cut Esper Sentinel for the Glass Casket. Sentinel's not very good in this matchup. Don't think Pithing Needle's worth it. Honestly, Karn is a card that once it's in play is already doing a lot of damage, so like the passive ability is almost worse for us than the -2, so I'm not sure Pithing Needle's a great answer for Karn, but yeah. Mono Green Elves in general is tricky if you don't have an early Sword, and like them having Karn on top of that means that this is going to be a very tough matchup, so stealing game 1 is huge. I think we just want to try and mull for either a fast Sword or fast early interaction. On a 6, I think we have to keep this, unfortunately. Ingenious Smith is pretty good because it does help us dig for Glass Casket to kill stuff like Elvish Archdruid, but it might be a little slow on the draw here. You know, if they haven't turned to Elvish Archdruid, it's probably too late at that point. Okay, same sort of thing. Circle of Dreams Druid is going to be very difficult to beat here. I mean, definitely looking for interaction off the Ingenious Smith. Okay, perfect. There's the Glass Casket, so at least we now have an answer for the Circle of Dreams Druid. Just got to hope they don't have an absolutely insane turn here. Oh, wow, okay. I was going to say that's a pretty good start, but they only hit 1 creature off the Collected Company. Unfortunately, it is probably the best card in their deck, but we can at least use the Glass Casket here to kill the Archdruid. Oh yeah, you always want to be really careful with the auto tapper with Mycosynth Gardens, because it sometimes will want to use the mana fixing ability, overtaking damage off the Pain land, and it will also sometimes keep the Mycosynth Gardens untapped over your coloured producing lands, which can also mess you up in certain spots. So then also we're going to play the Portable Hole out here just because they've already got a Circle of Dreams Druid in place, so we're essentially just denying them 2 mana by doing that Portable Hole, which is pretty sick. So we'll see what else they've got here. Okay, Leaf Crown Visionary is not great for us because, you know, oh wow, and they passed it, so they've obviously got another Collected Company. I think our best route to victory here is Ranger Captain, and then we can get a Fervent Champion to go alongside the Sword, but it's, you know, typically we want to start racing here, and, you know, because we didn't have early interaction and because we had to use the Ingenious Smith to find removal, we are definitely behind on the race here. They do have the Collected Company, and that's a pretty good hit. You know, now they have a ton of mana. As long as they have some other Elves, Oh, and they've got the Khan. Yeah, so I very much doubt we're going to win this one, unfortunately. But yeah, having to mull to 6 with a hand with no interaction. And they had the turn 2 Circle of Dreams Druid is always going to be pretty rough, I think. You know, this matchup really comes... a lot of the time will come down to how much early interaction you have and how quickly you can get Fervent Champion plus Sword set up as well. Or just the Sword in general. So, I mean, we'll take a draw step here, but I don't think there's anything we can draw to really save us. You know, Fervent Champion plus Sword, you need to get online before Khan's in play. I mean, a land isn't the worst. Maybe we can go Ingenious Smith, try and find a removal for the Archdruid or something, but, you know, I very much doubt this is going to be good enough when they have another Khan activation. They have so much mana. If they draw another Elf off the top, they can just combo win with the Staff of Domination. Okay, we did hit a Glass Casket, so, you know, we're not 0% to win here, but we're like 0.01% at this point, honestly. Well, I like Khan is a big issue for this deck. You really need to try and... That's why Portable Hole and Glass Casket is so important, to just stop the opponent ramping. Okay, so they crew the Sky Sovereign. I mean, if we can somehow kill the Khan, then we've got a reasonable shout. But, you know, they're just going to be able to crew up the Sky Sovereign, kill one of the Ingenious Smiths, and then I very much doubt we're going to be able to ever attack the Khan. Not even to mention that they get another -2 here. So, you know, they could get... I don't know. I doubt they're running Portals of Phyrexia. If they're running my build, they've got Worm Coil Engine, which is almost always going to win them the game here because... You know, we don't have any outs to it. We didn't bring the Giant Killer in. You know, to be honest, I think that would be a big mistake to bring the Giant Killer in because it doesn't hit anything else, right? But yeah, if they do get Worm Coil Engine, then there's basically no chance we win here. Even outside of that, they've got a ton of good options. You know, they could get Essica's Chariot. They could get Haywire Might. Yeah, okay, they get the Worm Coil Engine. So presumably they just cast the Worm Coil, crew up the Sky Sovereign, kill the Ingenious Smith, and then... Probably just going to lose here. Oh, they can cast the Worm Coil Engine for 5 mana because of the castle, which is pretty sick as well. So we go down to 10. I'll take another draw step just to see what we would have drawn, but yeah, I very much doubt we're going to win this. Yeah, okay. So that was kind of rough, but to be expected if we don't have early interaction, the opponent gets a turn 2 Circle of Dreams Druid down. So again, you know, I don't think we really want to make too many changes to sideboarding. Portable Hole and Glass Casket are just the most important cards in this matchup, are just slowing the opponent down. So just got to hope that... I mean, being on the play is going to be huge here as well. Right, I think we'd have had a much better chance if we'd been on the play last game. Okay, no early interaction, but turn 1, 4/4 is pretty sick. So I think we have to keep this. And then, you know, next turn we can either go second Retrofit Foundry. Oh, well, they do have the Thermal Nano Elves. But yeah, next time we can either make a 1/1 off the Foundry or... Oh, perfect. Okay, that's really good. So we've got another Ornithopter here. So now we can make a turn 2 4/4 as well. And if we hit the sword at any point now, I think we're just, you know, almost guaranteed to win because, you know, if we can get in for early damage... You can often just finish the opponent off with the sword. Right, the Elves does need a few turns to set up. And so you often do have time, even if you don't have a Fervent Champion, to just manually equip the sword. Okay, so they do have a lot of docks. Thankfully, they didn't have an Archdruid or Circle of Dreams Druid. And we hit the third land, which is huge. So Fable is a card that you generally want to get into play as early as possible, but in this situation, I think we just want to apply as much pressure as possible here. So I'm just going to go for Ranger Captain and Shooter, the third Ornithopter out the deck. And now even if the opponent does have like an Archdruid or Circle of Dreams Druid, they're basically forced to chump with a lot of stuff next turn. So, okay, they got War Master, so that is a way they can chump, but I'm hoping we're far enough ahead on board now that we can start breaking apart this board by forcing them to chump block with a bunch of stuff. So we can turn the Ornithopter into a 4/4 here, and now, you know, we've got a lot of power in play here. So I think we'll just lead on attacking with everything here. And they have to block at least 2 things here, right? So they block with a Sentinel and a 1/1, makes sense. And they go down to 1. So if we draw a sword here at any point, I think we're good. definitely going to play the Fable here. Just want to get more pressure on board if possible. And I think I'm also going to play the land because, you know, we have even at this point we have a lot of stuff that we could potentially do with our mana here. You know, we could retrofit a Foundry. We could, unfortunately, we can't use Mycosynth Gardens to copy a 4/4. That would be really sick. You can only copy non-token stuff. Oh wow, War Master's pretty good for them. That gets them more blockers in play, but they're still going to have to block with everything here. And we can start making 1/1s off the Foundry as well, so... interesting. So another Fable isn't bad, but I think even if we cycle this away into a land, if we could find a portable hole or a glass casket there, I think that basically just solidifies the win. Even though we did cash it in for a land, we can still just make tokens off the retrofit Foundry here. You know, we could either make 2 1/1s or make, you know, we can make a 1/1 servo and then make a 1/1 Thopter, so the opponent has to find a Jasper Sentinel because they're at 1, right? If we can make a 1/1 flyer, we should just, even if they have blockers on the ground, they'll be dead on board to the Thopter next turn. Okay, so they block to keep the War Masters around, which is clever, right? Because that can potentially put 2 more blockers into play for them next turn if they draw an Elf. But yeah, like, I think the main reason I cycled away the Fable there is because I think I would rather make a 1/1 Thopter hit anyway, just to guarantee lethal for next turn. Wow, they just passed. They draw Collected Company. I mean, even if they do have Collected Company, they need to hit exactly Jasper Sentinel to survive here. So we'll make a 1/1 on the ground, make a 1/1 Thopter, and now, unless they happen to have company into Jasper Sentinel, they're just dead next turn. And then I'm also going to use my last mana here to make another copy of Retrofit Foundry, just to keep making, you know, 1/1s for them to have to block every single turn. And we get the Fable flipping into Reflections. That's another threat as well. So we'll attack it. I mean, the fact they haven't conceded yet makes me think they must have Collected Company. Wow, they did. Okay. So, but I mean, they need to hit exactly Jasper Sentinel, unless they're running like Cruel Harpoon or something. Wow, they did hit the Jasper Sentinel. I mean, that's a pretty good hit. They still have to block everything, though. And even though they block the 1/1, we can still just turn it into a 4/4 with one of these Retrofit Foundries anyway. So I think the opponent's still in trouble here, right? They have to block with at least... Yeah, they block with the War Masters. Wow, they're blocking with the Leaf Crown Visionary as well. I mean, I'm surprised to see that. So even though they did draw Collected Company into Jasper Sentinel, that's still not going to be enough, I don't think. So here, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter what order we put those blockers in because they're both dying anyway. Then we can just turn this 1/1 into a 4/4. And then we can also just make another 1/1 next turn. But yeah, I mean, even though they did hit like almost the perfect draws there, we still, you know, we're still too far ahead on board for that to really matter. Yeah, okay, sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And, interesting. I think we can keep this, right? You know, we've got Fervent Champion. If we can hit a Sword off Ingenious Smith for turn 3, that'll be really sick. Okay, so Blood Crypt into Thoughtseize, probably against Rakdos midrange here. Wow, they take the Fervent Champion. I mean, I wasn't expecting that. I was for sure expecting them to take Ingenious Smith or Ranger Captain, because, you know, Rakdos is all about going 1-for-1, and Ingenious Smith and Ranger Captain are both 2-for-1s. I don't know, maybe they have more discard spells here? Okay, they Fatal Push the Fervent Champion. Okay, they do have a second Thoughtseize. I still feel like they would probably be more interested in taking the Smith and the Ranger Captain here. Unless they could potentially have a third Thoughtseize, which would obviously be pretty rough. Okay, Season Pyromancer. I guess they were just trying to clear the way for their turn 3 play. Crocs is pretty difficult. You know, Croxer can be pretty tricky to beat unless we have a portable hole. So interesting here whether we want to go for Ranger Captain or Ingenious Smith. Obviously, Ranger Captain is much more mana efficient, but... So I think we're probably going to go for that. But Ingenious Smith can potentially find more powerful cards on their own, right? You know, we don't really want Fervent Champion or Ornithopter here because we don't have a Sword or a Retrofit Foundry. So I think, you know, this Esper Sentinel is generally a card you want to play as early as possible. But I still think at this point in the game, Sentinel still has a decent amount of value because, you know, the opponent's only going to have 4 mana here, and it is going to slow their ability down to interact. Okay, there's a Blood-Tithe Harvester. I only got 5 cards in the graveyard, but they can... Oh, they have another Thoughtseize. So that gets rid of the Ingenious Smith, and now we're kind of running on empty. We just have to rely on the top of our library now, which is kind of rough, but sometimes matchups against Rakdos end up playing out like this. Wow, another land. So they're going to be able to escape the Croxer here. We just need to hope to be able to draw a Portable Hole soon, I guess. You know, that's why that Ingenious Smith would have been so useful, because it could potentially find us an answer for the Croxer. So yeah, them having that last Thoughtseize was pretty backbreaking. And now, you know, not only are we reliant on the top of our deck, but we're facing down a very fast clock at this point. So I think, even though Darksteel Citadel could potentially trigger an Ingenious Smith straight away, I don't want to give away the last card in my hand, because it could potentially incentivize them to use the discard spell when we only have a land in play. Well, they don't attack with the Harvester. Interesting. I mean, I think I'm just going to have to play the Sentinel and the Battlefield Forge here. Annoyingly, even if they make us draw a card off the Sentinel, they can just make us discard it immediately to the Croxer, and we're probably just going to have to chump block the Croxer with one of these Sentinels anyway, so... If they didn't have the Croxer, I think, you know, this game would obviously be a lot closer here, but since they do, you know, they've put us on a very fast clock now. So attack with the Croxer. We take 3 off the trigger. We're going to have to chump block here, otherwise we're just losing way too much life. They'll just swing in with everything next turn. So this draw step is huge. Oh, wow, we just hit a land. Yeah, so I don't think we're going to be winning this now. Sometimes, you know, matchups against Rakdos are sometimes going to end up like this if you don't draw very well off the top. Wow, Rankle. That's not a card I expected to see. You know, interesting choice though. You know, it is a card you could potentially tutor off the Crucius if you're interested in that sort of thing. And they can make us they can force us to sack the Ranger Captain here. I can't imagine that Rankle's better than Shieldred though, so there must be some specific reason they want that. I mean, I'll give myself an extra draw step here, but I don't think there's anything we can draw that would save us from this spot. Wow, we draw a land anyway, okay. So that was kind of rough, but I mean, sometimes matchups against Rakdos end like that. If they can use discard spells against your key stuff and then you don't draw well out of it, that's always going to happen. So Portable Hole isn't that great here. We definitely want the Giant Killer as a way to kill Shieldred. I'm going to bring in the Hearse as a way to kill, you know, get rid of Croxer and stuff, and Seasoned Pyromancer. And then I do want a couple of Glass Casket. You know, removal isn't the most important thing, but I feel it's very, very important to be able to kill Reflection of Kiki Jiki. That's a card that if you're not able to kill can just snowball the game completely. So I do want some number of Glass Casket to be able to kill that. And also, you know, if they do manage to escape Croxer, it gives us an out to that as well. But, you know, we do have a lot of good tools to fight in this matchup. Ingenious Smith and Ranger Captain are 2-for-1s. Retrofitter Foundry is incredibly good against them if they don't have Brotherhood's End as well. Yikes. So even though we have Thopter Foundry, you can't keep a one-lander against Rakdos. You'll just get super punished. The most important thing is that you have lands to be able to cast what you draw. And so even though you never really want to mulligan against Rakdos, I would much rather mulligan to a 6-card hand with 4 lands than a 7-card one-lander. Because now we can actually, even if they Thoughtseize here, or Inquisition, we can still hopefully play what we draw off the top. Whereas a one-lander, you can just be left in situations where they Thoughtseize away all your 2-drops and you're just left with, you know, you just can't cast what you draw off the top. Interesting. So it looks like they've got priority for something here. Maybe they're choosing not to use the discard spell for some reason. So I think we're just going to play the Ranger Captain here, and interesting what we grab. I think probably an Esper Sentinel. I could see an argument for Giant Killer, but, you know, we didn't see Shieldred game 1. And we've already got Shadow Spears away to gain life, and they're pretty far away. Well, I guess that, you know, they're 1 turn away from having Shieldred if they do have it immediately, but I feel like Esper Sentinel is more generically useful, right? If they are running Shieldred, they're probably not running it in that many numbers. And Sentinel is just going to be generally more useful at this point in the game. But I could see an argument to getting Giant Killer just as a, you know, a backup for if they do draw it. Okay, so they Thoughtseize away the Fervent Champion, and they Infernal Grasp the Ranger Captain. So again, we're running on empty, but we do have a lot of good top decks. Mycosynth Gardens can actually copy the Esper Sentinel as well, so I think I'm going to do that now before the opponent has access to Fatal Push or something. Because now they're really taxed on their non-creature spells. Okay, if they do have creatures, that's a little bit annoying, but at least it might, you know, incentivize them not to play something like a Fable of the Mirror Breaker or a Fatal Push. Okay, Ingenious Smith's a great draw. So we'll see what we hit here. Okay, interesting. So we hit Glass Casket. So I think we're just going to snap that off. I want to start applying pressure here if we can. You know, if we start applying pressure, it puts the opponent in a position where they have to use removal to slow us down. And with 2 Esper Sentinels in play, that's actually quite difficult for them to do. Okay, they did have a Fable in hand, so yeah, 2 Esper Sentinels did disincentivize them from playing the Fable. So I am very glad I used the Mycosynth Gardens there. And now the opponent is in a tough spot unless they have something like a Shieldred. Okay, they can just play a Fable and pay for both Esper Sentinel triggers here. Okay, Darksteel Citadel, not the best draw. It does give us an extra counter on the Ingenious Smith. So I think we'll just equip the Shadow Spear to the Ingenious Smith, attack in here, and then we can move the Shadow Spear over to an Esper Sentinel to make it even more difficult for the opponent to pay the tax on the Sentinel because it'll have 2 power. Okay, so they do get to loot off the Fable, which will fix their hand. Wow, they just had 2 lands in hand, so Fable did do a lot of work for them there. Blood Tithe Harvest is scary considering that the Fable's flipping to Reflection next turn. They can start copying it. Wow, they choose not to attack with the 2/2. I mean, we're very happy to see that. So drawing Fable's a pretty good draw here. I think I'm just going to equip the Shadow Spear back to the Ingenious Smith here. Get in for 4. Oh, do they have a removal spell for the Smith? Oh, they have Fatal Push, so that's not great. So we are in a pretty tricky spot here where we really don't want them to start copying the Blood Tithe Harvester with Reflection. So we're going to have to really, you know, hope we get something good off the loot of the Fable here. So let's see what the opponent has. But yeah, ideally we're looking for Glass Casket here if we can, but we've only got 1 more in the deck, so maybe it was a little hasty to use the Casket on the Harvester, but I feel like we needed to start applying pressure there. Okay, opponent drawing a land is huge there. Okay, Darksteel Citadel, that's not going to be good enough. Oh, interesting. Okay, so if we're not going to draw Glass Casket, the sword is actually probably the next best thing we can draw, because that means that whatever we equip isn't going to be able to be targeted by the Harvester. So I could see an argument to equipping the 2/2 here, but I think it's probably slightly better to equip the Sentinel, because then I think it's better to have an unkillable Sentinel than an unkillable 2/2, even though the 2/2 is going to start producing treasures. I'm going to attack with the 2/2 as well, because I want mana to be able to cast what we hit off the sword here. Yeah, okay, so because we made the treasure, we can play the Retrofit Foundry now, which is pretty nice. Again, I could see an argument to maybe equipping the 2/2 so that we get additional treasures every time we attack, which then enables us to play what we draw off the Sentinel. But I mean, I think we're in a pretty good spot here. As long as we can dodge Fatal Push, then I think we're actually pretty good. Oh, are you kidding me? Or, I mean, Brotherhood's End is like the perfect draw for the opponent here. That's really rough for us. Wow, okay. I mean, we've gone from like being in a really good spot to now being super far behind. So yeah, that top deck was very, very good for the opponent, obviously. I mean, thankfully we do get Reflection here. Oh, okay. That's actually a very good draw. I mean, not as good as the Brotherhood's End, but this should keep us in the game now, because now we can equip the Reflection. And again, as long as they don't draw a Fatal Push here, we should be in a decent spot, because they can't attack with either Harvester or Reflection because we can just block. They can't kill the Reflection with the Harvester either because of the protection from red. So that was a pretty clutch draw. You know, I think if we didn't draw that there, we probably would have just got run over by Reflection plus Blood Tithe Harvesters here. Okay, so opponent's looting. As long as they don't draw Fatal Push here, I think we're good. I mean, I was going to say, you know, they need a way to trigger Revolt, but they can just copy the Blood Tithe Harvester to get blood tokens. Oh, no, okay. Arcanist is rough, because now they can use the Arcanist to Fatal Push the Reflection, which is kind of rough. So, I mean, we can make a copy of the sword first here and equip it, but I think it's better to just attack first and see what we hit, and then potentially make a copy of the sword afterwards. So yeah, we'll see what we hit here. Okay. So we got Fable and the sword. So I think we're going to play the Fable and the sword and the Ornithopter. The only issue here is that the opponent can copy the Blood Tithe Harvester to get a blood token, sacrifice the blood token to trigger Revolt, and then Fatal Push the Reflection. And then they could potentially use the Blood Tithe Harvester to kill all the other creatures so that we can't equip the sword to anything. But if we get to keep one of the creatures alive here, we can just attack for lethal next turn. So I've just got to hope the opponent doesn't go for the Fatal Push here, because, right, they can crack the Blood Token, attack with the Arcanist to Fatal Push the Reflection, and then use Blood Tithe Harvesters to kill the 2/2 and the Ornithopter. So I assume they Fatal Push the Reflection and crack the Blood Token in response here. Probably. Wow, they go after the 2/2. Okay, so I think they messed up there, right? They should have cracked the Blood Token, Fatal Push the Reflection, and then use the Harvester to kill the Ornithopters. So yeah, we'll just block with the Thopter, and then unless they can get another Fatal, or unless they have another Fatal Push in hand, we should just be able to attack for lethal with the Reflection next turn, right? I mean, to be honest, I think we probably would have won this game if they hadn't drawn the Brotherhood's End anyway. But yeah, I mean, it looks like unless they draw a Fatal Push exactly now, we should be good to win next turn. I think. Wow, okay, sick. We got there. I mean, that's... yeah. That just shows the power of this sword. I mean, to be honest, I didn't think sword would be that good in the Rakdos matchup, you know, because of Fatal Push. But if they just have Harvesters and Reflections, it can put in a lot of work. So, sideboarding here, I mean, I'm kind of tempted to bring in an extra Lantern, but I'm not really sure it's worth it. I mean, because we saw Arcanist specifically. Not 100% sure here. I mean, Shadow Spear does seem quite important, but I think I'm just going to cut the Shadow Spear for an extra Lantern because we saw the Arcanist specifically. You know, if it was just Croxa, then I think Hearse is, you know, you only really want one piece of Graveyard Hate to deal with the Croxa specifically. But because we've seen Arcanist as well, I'm also going to bring in the Lantern because, you know, they're much more heavy on the Graveyard synergies in this particular build. Okay, so I mean, typically you don't want to mulligan against Rakdos, and having a turn 1 Sentinel and Foundry and Smith and Ranger Captain, you know, all of these cards are 2 for 1, so this hand is very, very good against Rakdos. And the opponent mulls to 6 as well, so... okay, no turn 1 Thoughtseize is great. Wow, we draw an Ornithopter off the top. Okay, interesting. So this is a real consideration, whether we want to go for Esper Sentinel or Foundry Thopter, because if we go Foundry Thopter and they have Fatal Push, that slows us down a lot. Whereas going Sentinel first makes Fatal Push a lot worse. So I'm going to lead on the Sentinel. That could be risky because, you know, they could... the fact they went for the Canyon Slough makes me think they didn't have a turn 1 Thoughtseize. Interesting, we drew Unlicensed Hearse as well. So even though you generally want to get Foundry Thopter down as early as possible, I'm actually going to go for the Hearse here because it would be worst case scenario if they go, you know, Thoughtseize and then Thoughtseize again off the Arcanist. So I want to get Hearse in here just to shut the graveyard off so they don't start getting value off the Arcanist. Okay, they grasp at Esper Sentinel. I assume they pay the 1 here. Yeah, okay, so that's pretty good. I mean, I feel like we're in a decent spot now. You know, we've shut off the opponent's early stuff. We've made them slow down by making them pay an extra mana to play the Infernal Grasp. And now we can start developing ourselves here. Okay, another Ornithopter is interesting. So I think here we definitely want to go Ingenious Smith into Thopter Foundry. And then we can potentially use the Ranger Captain to get the last Ornithopter out the deck as well, assuming the Foundry survives. Now, we are slightly vulnerable to Brotherhood's End here, which is a bit of a concern, but, you know, I can't imagine they're running more than a 2 of, and we are going to start applying a ton of pressure here if they don't have something good themselves. Okay, so they go for Fable. Again, we've got their graveyard unlocked, so we don't have to worry about the Arcanist. We've also got the Retrofit Foundry. Okay, they Thoughtseize us, so I imagine that they take the Ranger Captain or the Sword here. Okay, they take the Sword, which is probably the card I'm least excited about in this hand in particular, because we can turn the Thopter into a 4/4. You know, we don't have the Fervent Champion, so it's going to take us 5 mana to equip the Sword. And then, you know, we use the Hearse here to exile something from the graveyards. And then... Glass Casket is interesting, but I think we just want to keep applying pressure here, so I'm going to play the Ornithopter here. Puts a counter on the Ingenious Smith. We can attack him with the 2 4/4s. And the opponent's really on the back foot here. They kind of need to find a Brotherhood's End at this point. And then we can go Ranger Captain, tutoring another Ornithopter here. Now, I don't want to play 2 Ornithopters, you know, in the same turn because we can only make 1 4/4, and developing more to the board just makes us more vulnerable to Brotherhood's End. I'm just trying to think whether we want to potentially set a stop to crack the Ranger Captain during the opponent's upkeep to stop them playing Brotherhood's End, but even if they have the Brotherhood's End, we still get to keep a 4/4 Ingenious Smith and a 3/3 Ranger Captain, and sacking the Ranger Captain could take us off lethal if they put more threats into play, so I think in this particular position it's probably best to save the Ranger Captain. Okay, interesting. They go for City Stalker, so we lose the Glass Casket, but we still get to keep the Ornithopter here. And I mean, I don't think that's going to be good enough, right? We can make the Ornithopter into a 4/4 here. We can still play another one next turn as well. So just going to apply as much pressure as possible. Okay, sick. We got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going first here, which is nice. And yeah, this hand looks great. We've got Esper Sentinel on turn 1. We got early interaction, which is going to be valuable against the Lurrus deck. So I think I've faced this person a few times before, and I think they're on Death Shadow, but every Lurrus deck, Portable Hole is going to be good against, because their deck is obviously going to be full of cheap permanents. So, nearly clicked on Portable Hole by mistake. That would have been a disaster. But yeah, Esper Sentinel on turn 1 is really good. Then we got, Portable Hole for next turn potentially, and Fable on turn 3. So yeah, definitely looking good here. Wow, they lead on commanding faces Kakazan, so that gives us a card off the Sentinel, which is really good here. Oh, and we draw a Fervent Champion. Interesting. Okay, so we're definitely going to play the Fervent Champion here. And then I've got to decide whether I want to play the Portable Hole here or not. So I assume we're against Death Shadow from Mana Confluence into Kumano. So I think there are obviously going to be much better targets for the Portable Hole. But since I'm probably going to be playing the Sword of Forge of Frontier, or Fable if they kill the Fervent Champion, I'd rather go for Portable Hole here just to get it off the board, make most use of our mana, and get ahead on tempo so that we can play a 3-drop next turn. I mean, again, maybe it's best to hold the Portable Hole, but this way we just get ahead on tempo. If they kill the Esper Sentinel here, we can just play the Sword. If they kill the Fervent Champion, we can play the Fable. Okay, they do Molten Impact the Esper Sentinel, but thankfully we can play the Sword and immediately equip it, which means that the Fervent Champion will be immune to the excess damage of Molten Impact, which is really nice. So we get to swing in for 3, get the Sword trigger, and the nice thing about Sword is we can play the extra land from our hands, which enables us to now play the Retrofitter Foundry. So yeah, being able to get in with Fervent Champion is really huge here. Now obviously Fatal Push would be kind of brutal. Okay, they got Knight of the Ebon Legion, so this would unfortunately trigger both of the Knight of the Ebon Legion, so they'll both go up to 2/3s, but that shouldn't be an issue. We can still attack into them, because even if they double block, we'll only kill one of them, right? As in, the Fervent Champion won't die, because we'll kill one of them, and then the second one will only deal 2 damage. So if they do block here, it's just to stop us getting the trigger from the Sword, which, I wouldn't blame them for doing it, honestly, because it will just snowball the game. Okay, so they do double block. Again, that won't kill the Fervent Champion unless they have like a combat trick here. And then definitely going to play the Fable. That's a card that you want to get into play as early as possible for the most part. And then we could play the second Retrofitter Foundry here, but I think I like just passing and making a 1/1 off the Foundry just to make best use of our mana, if that makes sense. Wow, they Fatal Push the 2/2. That has to be a mistake, right? Oh, I guess they forgot that it had protection from red. I guess it is a new card and not many people are running it, so... But yeah, they definitely should have Fatal Pushed the Fervent Champion. And the reason I wanted to play the Retrofitter Foundry there was to be able to make a 1/1, so if they did kill the Fervent Champion, like, had they Fatal Pushed the Champion there, they would have killed both of our creatures, but we could have just made a 1/1 off the Foundry and equipped it next turn. Since we don't need to equip it because we still have the Fervent Champion in play, I think I'm just going to block here because Scourge of the Skyclaves is a card that I've seen from their side, and so... Oh, they have the second Fatal Push anyway. Okay, sure. So that's kind of rough. Now I kind of wish that I hadn't blocked with the 1/1. I would have obviously loved to equip it this turn. Wow, 2 Retrofitter Foundries is sick. But yeah, that was probably greedy, to be honest. Scourge of the... Actually, I don't know. If that last card was Scourge of the Skyclaves, I would have regretted not blocking there. And it's not the worst thing. I mean, to be honest, being able to connect with the Sword again this turn would have been pretty huge, so... Maybe it was slightly greedy to chump block with the 1/1 there. So here, we could make a 4/4, but I think that's probably a mistake because we can just put them on a 2-turn clock with this 1/1 in the air. Right, if we make a 4/4, they can just chump block with whatever. Now we've drawn a Fervent Champion. I was going to equip the Thopter with the Sword, but now we've got the Fervent Champion. Actually, I think I still will. That puts them on a 2-turn clock. And they need exactly Fatal Push to kill it. Their red base removal won't do anything here because of protection from red and green. Okay, sweet. We hit 2 lands. Oh, whoops. So I shouldn't... Oh, no, it's fine. For a second, I thought I played a land earlier, but I didn't. Now we can just equip the Sword We could equip the sword to the Fervent Champion for free, but I don't know if that's worth it because I feel the Thopter's more valuable here. If we do that, then that means they could potentially kill the Thopter with a Molten Impact, whereas this way they need exactly... Well, they basically need black removal to kill the Thopter here because of the protection. Okay, sweet, we got there, nice. So Sword carried us that game because they rely on some red base removal. So this matchup, we definitely want the Glass Caskets because Death Shadow and stuff like that is very important to kill, as is Knight of the Ebon Legion. I'm also going to bring in Giant Killer because of stuff like Death Shadow as well, as just a permanent way to deal with it. And then, even though Shadow Spear is good in this matchup, I think it's the card that isn't the most necessary, if that makes sense. Like, it is very good against Scourge of the Skyclaves, for example, but there's nothing else I really want to cut. You know, I could see trimming a Fable, but I feel like Fable just increases the consistency so much, especially if you're bringing in a bunch of removal. I like having Fable just to smooth your draws out. Okay, so this hand looks decent. You know, we don't have a creature, but we've got Foundry to make creatures. We've got Glass Casket as early interaction. We've got the Sword here as well, which, you know, obviously isn't good against Fatal Push, but as we saw last game, is very good if they're relying on their red damage-based removal as well. So, pretty happy with this hand. You know, if we didn't have the Glass Casket... they have Thoughtseize, so they might take the Casket here. I was going to say, if this hand didn't have the Casket, I think it's a fair bit worse. Oh, wow, we just draw another one off the top. Okay, so I'm going to play the Battlefield Forge here, rather than the Sacred Foundry, because of Scourge of the Skyclaves. Doing this means they can't play Scourge on turn 2, which is pretty important. Okay, interesting. Stormfist Crusader. So I think we want to kill that. Even though it gives us both cards, I think it is a threat that we want to take out. So, because I feel like we're probably we're probably better off at a low resource stalemate because of stuff like Retrofitter Foundry or Sword, whereas the opponent's probably better off as they draw more cards because their deck has kind of combo aspects to it. Okay, Fable's a great draw here. Definitely going to slam the Fable. And then that's going to start running away with the game. You know, we'll start smoothing our draws out, potentially getting us more mana unless the opponent has a Fatal Push here. Okay, they do have the Fatal Push, but now they're completely out of gas. You know, they're just top decking. So we'll see what they draw here. Okay, they draw Knight of the Ebon Legion. That's not a bad one. Okay, interesting. I think we just keep everything here, honestly. We can casket the Knight of the Ebon Legion, otherwise they can just start activating it to pump stuff. And then I think we'll just pass, make a 1-1 off the Retrofitter Foundry, and then if we draw another land here, we can potentially play and equip the Sword the same turn. So if they just spend their turn putting Lurrus into hand... Okay, Kazal's Fury, we need to be wary of that. But yeah, if the opponent attacks here, which they do, we'll definitely take the damage here. And then, like I said, if we do draw a land off the top, we can just go Sword and equip the same turn. Oh, okay. I mean, that also does it, right? We can just go Fervent Champion, Sword, equip the Sword to the champion, and then start triggering it as well. And if we hit a land off these two cards, we can play the second Retrofitter Foundry in our hand, which would be pretty sick. Okay, perfect. We did hit a land, so we can go Darksteel Citadel into Retrofitter Foundry and just pass the turn back. And now they can... Well, I was going to say they can potentially block the Fervent Champion with Lurrus, but we're very happy with that exchange, right? Lurrus is a pretty problematic threat. Okay, second Fervent Champion's not bad. I don't think it's worth playing because we're not going to be able to attack with it. And you wouldn't get the buff from the second Fervent Champion anyway because it has protection from red. So it has protection from its own, you know, from the other Fervent Champion's targeted ability, if that makes sense. Okay, so they let it through, makes sense. See what we hit here. Okay, we hit an Ornithopter. That's pretty nice. Because now we can just turn that into a 4-4 immediately. We can play the second Fervent Champion. And... I mean, we could potentially move the Sword over, but I don't think it's going to really make much of a difference here. I mean, thinking about it, we probably should have done just to stop them from attacking, but don't think it should make a huge difference, to be honest. Now I'm going to make a copy of the Sword with the Mycosynth Gardens, and unless they have Fatal Push, we should just win this turn, I think. Then we can make a copy of the Ornithopter to make an extra 4-4 here. So now we get a 4-4 off the copied Ornithopter before it sacrifices itself. And I could see an argument to keeping the second Ornithopter as a threat they can't block, but I think, you know, I'm probably going to equip the second Sword to the same Fervent Champion here. Or I guess we could actually no, I probably want to equip, spread the threats around a bit, so we could equip the other Fervent Champion with the second Sword. And now one Fatal Push doesn't stop them, right? Now we can copy the 4-4, and even if they have Fatal Push here, I think it's going to be tough for them to win. because we're attacking with 3 4/4s. If they fatal push one of the Fervent Champions, we're still getting in with the other one. So even though they have the Lurus Life thing, I think it's going to be really hard for them to win from this spot. Unless, if they have 2 fatal pushes, they've got a chance. But even then, we've still got 2 swords in play. And retrofit a Foundry, so we could make, flying Thopters and then start equipping them as well. So yeah, maybe I should have played the Fervent Champion and attacked with everything. But just in case they have double fatal push here, I'm going to play slightly more conservatively. If they have double fatal push, then they can just eat the 1/1 and gain some life back. If they don't, actually, yeah, maybe it's best to just attack, play Fervent Champion and attack with everything. But I'm still pretty confident that we'll win, regardless of which line we take. So they block 2 4/4s here. To be honest, yeah, it probably was better. If they do have double fatal push, it is probably better to just play the Fervent Champion and attack with everything. Looks like they do have something else. Wow, they did have 2 fatal pushes. So would we have had lethal if we'd attacked with everything? No, okay, it wouldn't have made a difference because we would have only got in for an extra 2. They would have been down to 2. So either way, we can just automatically equip the 2 swords here. Sacrifice one of the 4/4s, and yeah, unless they have, even if they have Brotherhood's End. Actually, wait, if they do have Brotherhood's End, I think we still have a chance. Okay, they just scoop it up. Sick, we got there. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks good. We don't have anything on turn 2, unfortunately, but we do have, well, I guess Retrofit a Foundry works on turn 2, right? We can go Foundry Thopter on 1. Then, even if we don't draw a 2-drop, we can just make another 1/1 with the Foundry on turn 2. Not having early interaction for Elvish Mystic is a concern, especially going second. If they're on Devotional Elves, it could be quite tough. Okay, they might have kept a 1-lander, though. Although 2 Mana Dorks is kind of going to mitigate that a fair amount. We'll definitely make a 4/4 here. I think we just need to start applying pressure. Okay, Portable Hole. That's a pretty good one. Wow, we'd have loved to have that last turn to slow them down even more, but I still think it's worth playing here just to deny them mana. Much better to get rid of one of their elves when they're stuck on a 1-lander than to just make another 1/1 off the Foundry. And then with Ranger Captain, we can search for the Fervent Champion. Okay, so we're definitely against Devotion here, which I'm not sure which is a more scary matchup. Okay, we drew so we drew the Fervent Champion. So now we could potentially go Ranger Captain, Shooter, and Ornithopter, since we already have the Fervent Champion here, and then make an extra 4/4, which applies even more pressure. So just got to hope they don't have Khan. But yeah, we're definitely going to ignore the Kiora here. We just want to go face, because since we have Fervent Champion plus Sword, that's very good at dealing the last few points of damage that we need to win. So just got to hope if we can avoid Khan for 1 turn, I think we're odds-on favourite here. Because, if they can get Khan in play, we're not able to equip the sword anymore. Okay, Old Growth Troll, that's actually not too bad. I'm not too concerned about that. So we'll see what else they do here. Okay, they untap the Llanowar Elves. Is that as a blocker, or do they have more stuff they want to play? I would love for them to tap out even more. Okay, Paradise Druid, so that's actually kind of good. That means they have less blockers. Obviously, that gives them more mana for next turn, but we're going to be getting in for a huge attack here, so we can go Sword into Fervent Champion. Then the Fervent Champion's obviously unblockable, and then I think we're just attacking with everything, right? They can block the Ranger Captain with the Old Growth Troll, but we're still getting in, even if they block the 4/4 with the Paradise Druid, we're still putting them down to 5, which means another Sword and we're guaranteed to win. They also lose the Paradise Druid, so they have even less mana going into next turn. They don't have Nykthos either, by the looks of things, so okay, looks like they're just blocking a 4/4 with the Old Growth Troll, which kind of makes sense, right? They take less damage, and they get to equip the Old Growth Troll as a, to the lands to produce even more mana. We'd have loved to hit a white land there to Portable Hole. We can also, they go down to 2 here, right? So they're just dead, right, I think? We can sack the Ranger Captain here, and I don't think there's anything, unless they're running like Voracious Hydra. Oh, even then that wouldn't work because they can't kill the Fervent Champion. So yeah, them not blocking with the Paradise Druid basically just meant they lost there. I guess if they had Khan in hand, they could have gone like Khan, Sky Sovereign maybe. But yeah, now we just win.
Unless the other thing they could potentially have here is Boseiju. If they have Boseiju for the sword, that's kind of rough. But we're not gonna, we're not gonna not attack just because they could have that, right? Because if they don't have exactly Boseiju here, we just win. So yeah, they definitely should have blocked with the Paradise Druid last turn. But I guess they didn't know that we were going to crack the Ranger Captain. So yeah, either way, we definitely want to bring Pithing Needle and Damping Sphere and a couple of Glass Casket. And yeah, just run it back like that. One change I have been tempted to make that I think I might make soon is swapping out Damping Sphere for a second Pithing Needle. Just because I have beaten Belcher when I've played it, but it's felt close, and Damping Sphere is pretty narrow, so if I do face more Belcher, I think I might replace Damping Sphere with a second Pithing Needle for that reason. Snapkeep here because we got Portable Hole, that would slow them down a lot. Especially if they keep a hand off the back of Leyline plus Llanowar Elves like they have here. So Portable Hold the Llanowar Elves, and that could slow them down quite a lot. Well, it will slow them down a lot, but oftentimes they'll keep a slightly clunkier hand on the back of Llanowar Elves surviving, which kind of looks like what's happened here. So Pithing Needle, I think the first target we want to name here is Kiora. Karn is something that is a problem once it's in play. We could name Karn, but we're more worried about the passive ability on Karn than the -2, and Pithing Needle only shuts off the activated abilities, whereas naming Kiora just stops them untapping Nykthos, which really limits their ability to go off. Okay, there's Old Growth Troll. So now we can go Ranger Captain and Tutor Fervent Champion, and this might seem kind of mad, but I'm actually tempted to crack the Ranger Captain during the opponent's upkeep here, because I feel like if they have Karn, we just can't beat that if they play Karn, right? Because our whole game plan revolves around racing with the Fervent Champion here. If we can equip the Fervent Champion with the sword, then we've got a really good chance. But if they play Karn here, there's, not only does it shut off the Retrofitter Foundry, but it also shuts off Fervent Champion and sword, which is like all we have. So even though we're essentially throwing away a 3/3 if they don't have Karn, I still think it's worth it here because so much of our game plan here revolves around being able to equip the sword. So they didn't even have the 4th land, so we did kind of waste the Ranger Captain, but I still feel like that was the right play, because if they did have Karn, we basically don't have a way to win. So we connect with the Fervent Champion here. I can't play the Portable Hole, but we'll definitely play the land. And yeah, having Mycosynth Gardens here is really huge as well, because next time we can make a copy of the sword and equip it immediately, and then that becomes a 5/5, and then we have another Mycosynth Gardens to make another copy of the sword as well, and we can start casting whatever we hit off it. The nice thing about copying sword with Mycosynth Gardens when you have a Fervent Champion is you use 4 mana to do it, but you get 4 cards off the top, and you can play 2 extra lands, so in a lot of ways you get almost all of the mana back immediately, which is sick. So we'll definitely do that. We'll definitely make a copy of the sword here and equip it immediately. And then we'll get 4 cards here. We already have 2 lands in hand, so we'll be able to cast at least both of those if we, unless we hit more lands off the top. Okay, perfect. Now we hit an Ornithopter, which we can turn into a 4/4. And then I think I want to prioritize getting the Ranger Captain here, because we can now get either another Fervent Champion or another Ornithopter here. I think probably want to get another Ornithopter. And we could potentially crack the Ranger Captain during the opponent's upkeep to shut them off Karn, considering we're so far ahead, but I'm not really sure that's necessary anymore, because we can just instantly kill the Karn with Fervent Champion anyway, right? If they go Karn minus, we can just cleanly attack it. Okay, sick. We got there anyway, but yeah, that was pretty nice.